Cool. Welcome, everyone. This is really exciting because we've been talking a lot about, Matt and I have been talking about building audience. And he turned out he was able to speak to Bloomberg and present this research. Am I right? Like, Matt? And this is really exciting because this is very much research driven and there's a lot of data. And I'm sure that everyone could have could find value in this talk. Thank you so much for being here. And maybe just one run. Let's introduce ourselves very quickly so that everyone has a context on who everyone is and yeah, what brings you here. So, Matt.
Sure. So first of all, I'm delighted to be here. So I, as I'll talk about in a second, I'm a professor. That's my day job, and I study digital audience. So after a couple of conversations about how to think about digital audiences, I thought it might be useful to adapt some of my research, the talk that I've given at a bunch of places, including week before last at The Economist, about how to understand audiences in the digital era. And I'm also here in Prog Code because I'm running CallThem, which is an app to help build civic habits and help to apply some of this research to getting people to engage more regularly, more habitually in civic life. So thank you for inviting me, Rapi.
Thank you for doing this. This has been exciting. And I didn't realize that we have three Matts here right now. So I'm going to say the last name. Malin, you're up.
Malin is here. Yeah, Matt Malin. I'm a full-stack web developer. I work for a university building apps and interactive activities for online courses. And I'm also working on Project Swimmy, so I'm interested in hearing about how these strategies could help us in terms of engaging with users for our app.
Thank you, Malin. Mr. Borg.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'm Matt, and I've been working on Phone Your Rep and the API, and I'm an amateur software developer, and I live in Vermont, and been working in Prog Code for a couple months now, and it's been great, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Matt. And Steve.
Hey, everybody. I'm a journalist. I write for Forbes and I write for Huffington Post. I run Waywire, which is former Cory Booker's company in New York. And I'm also now running a site called TrumpTracker.news. And really interested in how to get people to feel comfortable coming to sites, coming to apps, and returning and not getting burned out. Because I think that there's a lot of early burnout. So I'm glad to be here. And thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Thad.
Hey, I'm a Ruby developer. That's what I enjoy most, but I've had to use a lot of languages. Been developing for about 5 years, but I've been looking for open source opportunities all those 5 years, and it's only been in the past year that I've kind of started trying to volunteer my time toward these sorts of ends so civic coding. I've got an idea of like what I think bad politics are, and those are the politics that are full of fear and hate and things like that. And so that's what I'm here to work against.
Thank you, Thad. And Jace.
Hi, I'm Jace. I'm a recent CS grad, just starting in the industry. I'm about to start work for as a C# developer working in Xamarin. I also have a lot of experience teaching software development and experience in native iOS web, a bunch of different stuff. But yeah.
Thanks, Jace. Nice to see you here. And Anna.
Hey guys. So I'll turn on the video for this, I guess. I'm I come from the product side of things in tech, and I'm currently one of the co-founders of socialroots.io. So I'm really interested in, because we come from like the social media and tools and helping people run campaigns better. So I'm really interested in what Matt you have to say and what you know and how we can be more effective.
Thank you, Anna. And Joseph. Yeah, Joseph, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Okay. So before we begin, just a couple of facilitation procedures. So at any point in time you want to say anything, please type in stack in the chat area. So I'm doing it right now. Whenever Matt Hindman would want to take in anything from the stack, the order by which we call the people will be based on the stack. So if anything you have a nagging need, just do C, do C or comment, and it is in the purview of the presenter if he wants to call you or not. But please type in stack if you need to. So without further ado, thank you. Please take over from here, Matt. Thank you so much for doing this again.
I think you're muted, Matt.
Oh, there you go. Okay, you could start. Introduce yourself to us first, Joseph. I can hear you now.
Oh yeah, I had some mic trouble. I've never used Zoom before this in chat. So I do mostly front end development, UI UX. I've done I used to do geospatial systems. I worked a lot with maps, open layers, and Leaflet, and now I work for Monsanto, and I do mostly we're using React and Node.js over there. I got experience in a whole lot. Mostly, PHP is going out on the wayside. Mostly Node, Postgres. I kind of do the full stack. Mainly, I thought my role here would kind of be mentorship. I'm very busy at work lately, but I would like to, as I was talking with Rapi, look into maybe funding a little incubator so that we can all have a little freedom to spin up some VPNs and have fun. And it looks like we got a lot of young coders here, and I like to make it easy and enjoyable for them to get involved.
Thank you so much. This is really awesome, and we're really happy to have you here. So yeah, again, if you need, while Matt is talking, if you need something to be said, please type in stack. And Matt, if you want to call in the stack, let us know so we could facilitate it for you. But please take it away from here.
Absolutely. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me know. Let's double check and make sure that works. All right, and let's go to present. All right, we're going to need to go to the very end. Okay, let's go to the beginning. All right. Rob, is that coming through? Are we good in terms of the visuals? Rapi, can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Excellent. All right. So what I'm going to be talking about digital audience building. So a little bit about my professional background. What I spend more time these days doing than almost anything else is talking to newspapers that are getting eaten alive by the digital transition. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about here comes out of that context. But more broadly, the problem with digital audiences is that they are much more dynamic than people realize. Everybody talks about how dynamic digital audiences are, but in fact, the problem's significantly worse than most people think. So as I said before, I'm a prof at GW. This is what I study. If you want to find me on the Slack, it's just at Matt Hindman. And CallThem is at hashtag CallThem. But in order to illustrate what I'm going to be talking about today, I want to start out with two parables, two stories about just how easy it is to lose your audience online. So the first one is a story that maybe a few of you have heard. It's a story of Google's first A/B test. So somewhere around 2000, Google, after doing a bunch of focus groups, decided to rethink how many search results they should send users. So they started using 10 results just because that was what AltaVista had done. But focus groups, when you ask people, they said, well, they'd like 15 results or 20. Asked them if they'd like 25. They said, sure. So they, borrowing A/B testing from Amazon, they went ahead and separated off a whole bunch of treatment groups, huge treatment groups. One was given 15 results, another was given 20, another was given 25. They tested, make sure it was working, and went away for 6 weeks. And when they came back, 30% of the audience in the higher result groups was gone. They had lost a third of their audience. And what had happened was that over a short period of time, there was almost no difference. But serving 25 results took 2 seconds longer than serving 10. And over time, these losses snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. Another example of this phenomenon can be seen with bloggers, right? So early on, when blogs were in the late 90s, early 2000s, you would have the common phenomenon of bloggers who painstakingly built up a daily following of thousands of users, and then things were going great until the day that they went on vacation. When they come back 2 weeks later, they discovered that their entire audience was gone. Same problem, that they had essentially lost their audience. They'd lost a given fraction of their audience every day until most of it was gone. So the problem of digital audience is the problem of compounded growth. If you're not growing online, if you're not growing in your digital audience, you are dying, particularly in relative terms. And the bad news is that any public-facing or member-facing digital project, any website or app is in the digital audience. You can only succeed in this business if you understand what the problem is. So many of you probably heard discussions of stickiness. Stickiness is a way of combining 3 different problems. Getting people to use your app or getting people to your site, keeping them there, and then once they leave the app, once they leave the site, getting them back. We generally lump this into one term simply because the things that we can measure that predict all of these 3 things are highly correlated with each other. The things that get people coming back are generally the same things that get them to stay longer, to go to that second or third page on a news site, for example. And the core thing to understand about stickiness is that it is compounded. So essentially the argument here is that we need to think about audiences in an evolutionary way. Charles Darwin, when he was creating the theory of evolution, his real eureka moment came when he was reading Malthus. Darwin had the problem that he was looking at these different organisms and thinking about the ways in which they differentiate into species, but all of the changes, all these tiny little mutations could only give a small, tiny, almost imperceptible short-term advantage. But in reading Malthus, Darwin realized that over one generation, the differences might be small. But that stronger beak that got the finch through a particularly tough winter meant that there would be more finches with a stronger beak next time. And even more the second generation, and multiplicatively more the third generation, multiplicatively more the fourth and fifth and sixth generation. And this is what Darwin means when he talks about how tiny things make the difference in terms of which species grow exponentially and which end up going extinct. He says, a grain in the balance will determine which individual shall live and which shall die, which variety or species shall increase in number and which shall decrease or finally become extinct. Little things matter because they're multiplied together lots and lots of times. This is essentially a compound interest problem. We're all familiar with the difference between simple interest and compound interest. That's what we face every time we're dealing with a digital audience. But the compounding happens at the daily or even at the hourly rate. And we can see this very clearly when we're looking at digital audience data. So if this is true, if this is the way that we're thinking about audiences, how do we design for stickiness? What design factors in terms of website design, in terms of app design, which design factors influence growth rates? Well, the most consistent answer, and some of you I'm sure already know this, is speed. This, of course, is the moral of the story of Google's first A/B test. And no other factor has been found so consistently across so many different sites, so many different apps, so many different use cases to make a difference in both. Humans are sensitive to differences in responsiveness of 100 milliseconds or less than 1/10 of a second makes a big difference. And that's especially true in situations where you want people to do something hard. You want them to do something that makes them uncomfortable. You want them to do something like buy a product. Speed is an incredibly important cue for quality. So the other thing that, of course, matters is layout and interface. One of the things that we often see is that in redesigning, there can be a significant amount of gains from redesigning an interface. But I'm sure that many of you had the experience of redesigning a website. The dwell time goes way up and the return traffic goes way down. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about those kind of situations a little later. But spending a lot of time and energy at figuring out what the layout and interface makes a big difference, particularly in the types of contexts that I look at. It's a huge, huge issue for websites, and especially for news websites. And it particularly pays off in doing a redesign to, if at all possible, separate the layout from the actual physical location of the buttons from the design language. The other thing that we see big effects from is better matching of user preferences. Figuring out users are diverse, they have different kinds of content and different kinds of things that they like. So for websites in general, one of the biggest single lifts that we see in traffic retention is putting together better search and especially automatic content recommendation systems. I've commonly seen with news websites jumps, compounded traffic jumps, 40%, 50% just by putting in a better modern content recommendation system and making that automatic so they flow automatically from the first article that they're reading to the second or third or fourth. The other thing, and I think that this is pretty basic, but surprisingly overlooked, and I've had a number of conversations in the last 2 weeks that have emphasized this to me. Not so much with folks on this site, but with folks who are trying to build digital audiences. If you want to get people to use your new app or your new website, you have to get them to come from where they already are. You have to go where, if you're going to go hunting for audiences, you have to go where the ducks are. And that means that, like it or not, you have to go to Facebook, you have to go to other digital giants if you're going to get people to come to your site. It's not a recipe for success to try and replicate what Facebook has done over a decade to try and achieve a short-term political goal. Now, for those of us who are critical of these giants, and I'm on record of being plenty critical, that's a difficult ask, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the very end. But in general, we have to, if we want audiences, we have to deal with the digital giants. These are attention utilities, and there are no reasonable alternatives. The other thing that we see over and over in apps is that simplifying the design makes a big difference. There's a big hit when you change the layout in general, but if you're able to provide a simpler user experience to figure out where hitches are, you can get better results. This is often talked about by successful firms as lowering cognitive overhead. Some of you are familiar with this from the don't make me think rule of, or school of web design. And that's something we see absolutely in apps and other digital projects as well. The other thing, and I've got an ongoing debate about this with other folks who are doing daily action organizations. There's huge advantages to going mobile. It's true that it is hard to get people onto a mobile app. That's a big ask. But as many of you know, once an app is installed, they have much, much lower friction. The repetition on something like a news app, a mobile news app, is dramatically higher than we see with the same site, same content on the web. And that's true across a whole bunch of different domains. But stickiness isn't just about design. It's also about content. And that includes content like emails, that includes content like actions, that includes content like calling scripts, like the kinds we're dealing with in terms of CallThem. And it absolutely includes news stories, which are often part of our pitch as, well, political communicators to the people that we want to take action. One of the most consistent findings in looking at what makes content stickier is more content. So physically more content, often showing people, well, simplicity is a virtue. On the other hand, being able to demonstrate more content to users makes a difference. Not just a greater number of items, but also more diverse content. I mentioned above the importance of content recommendation systems. Interestingly enough, modern content recommendation systems don't just try to match users with the pieces of content that they think are going to be absolutely the most desired. What they're actually trying to do is maximizing the diversity of content that they're displaying. Netflix, for example, makes sure when they give you a set of recommendations that they're not just giving you 35 different sci-fi movies. Even if they think that sci-fi movies are exactly what you would most prefer. What they're trying to do is give you a sense of different genres, different types of content, so no matter what mood you're in, you're likely to find something that works. And lastly, and this one is another of the most consistent findings, content that's updated more frequently is absolutely crucial. So in a conversation with a senior executive at The Atlantic, one of the things that she said is that early on, The Atlantic had a massive problem. They were a monthly magazine. And they said that as they started doing testing, they found that when users returned and found that nothing on the site had changed, that essentially that they'd been taught to come back less often. And that's a general rule for any other type of mobile content, any other type of app. If you want people to use it repeatedly, if you want to build habits, you have to have new content. The other thing that really matters is novelty. One of the things that I'm working on right now is a project on fake news. And absolutely one of the most interesting, most important things if we have to go to these social networks and these digital giants, we have to produce novel content. That one of the biggest advantages of fake news articles is that these stories are brand new. They are brand new because they were just created. And that Facebook and Google and all of these different platforms have huge premiums for novelty. Novel content consistently does better than content that is familiar. And this is a finding actually that doesn't just hold true for digital communication. Probably the single biggest finding in direct mail, political direct mail, for example, is that producing content that doesn't look like what they're expecting gets a higher open rate. And that's still true online. The other thing is that it's not just that we go to Facebook, it's that we need to find, or go to Twitter, it's that we also need to find ways of signaling to users that other people are taking action, that other people have liked content, that other people are reading the same thing. Being able to demonstrate social proof makes a big difference. People are dramatically more likely to read exactly the same article with exactly the same headline if they can see a count of users that shows that lots of other people are engaging. And we need to find ways of applying that lesson in other parts of the digital space too. But in order to accomplish these kind of these design goals, in order to refine content, we have to build in testing from the very beginning. So one of the biggest innovations that the Obama campaign did was moving testing, A/B testing, from Silicon Valley into almost every part of their campaign, especially in every part of their digital campaign. So some of you may have seen this. They A/B tested all of their political ads. This is an example of an email that was sent. Actually, no, I'm sorry. This was an overlay to the website, not an email. Two different asks. The only thing that's different here is the photo. Anyone want to guess which of these ads performed better?
One on the right.
Yep, the one on the right, by a huge margin, actually, by almost 20%. Right? You don't see 20% margins everywhere, but you see them often enough that it's absolutely worth building testing platforms in. And we can see this also through, perhaps the clearest example of this is with headline testing, some of that research has become public. So this is the same, these are headlines that the Obama campaign sent just for one single email. Right? And as you can see, there is a 5-fold difference between the best performing headline and the worst performing headline. Even relatively small things like changing the headline makes a big difference. And this is something we see in news articles as well. So testing is an essential feature for any kind of digital political communication. And if you launch without testing tools in place, you limit growth. So one of the companies that's been most open about this is actually Microsoft. So Ron Kohavi, who is a name that some of you may know, was an executive at Amazon, is now at Google, and particularly, I'm not at Google, at Bing, and runs and Microsoft's online services. One of the things that he revealed a few years ago is that they keep very careful track of how much they've made doing this, and that they've made, by their count, $250 million from changes that they made to the website that were directly inspired by their testing platform. Interestingly enough, though, the biggest gains were not from testing-inspired changes. They were saved by catching mistakes. They were saved by killing improvements that actually weren't improvements. And of course, as many of you know, if you go to Google or you go to Bing, every user on that site, except for a permanent holdout sample, is in 1,000 or more treatment and control groups. The challenge with testing now is that very quickly it reifies, or you worry about it reifying the wrong thing. Daniel Ariely, who's a professor at Harvard Business School, says that you are what you measure. And it's very easy for all kinds of groups that are doing digital communication, and especially digital political groups, to measure the wrong thing. We need to be very careful, and I'll talk some about this if there's interest in the questions. We have to be very careful about what we're trying to maximize, because that often comes at the expense, if we're not careful, of other things that we care about. The rule of thumb that I tell organizations is ABB. Always be blending. That is, always be on the lookout, not for one golden metric, but if you can, focus on 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 metrics that should always be pointing in more or less the same direction. It's too easy with one metric to make a mistake. But if you always keep your eyes on 3 or 4 or 5 metrics, which are relatively correlated, you're less likely to make a mistake and end up maximizing the wrong outcome. So thank you very much. That's all that I have. And I look forward to having some questions.
Right. So I think we'll go through the stack now. Anna, I think you have a question. And please post stack if you have any questions to Matt. And thank you so much for this amazing presentation, Matt. And I'm using my phone to speak.
Yeah, I mean, basically just going back to that slide earlier about layout. You said something about separating layout from buttons or navigation.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, Anna. Please continue.
Oh, I didn't catch exactly what you meant by that.
So let me give you an example. So the Atlantic redesigned their website, big redesign, and they, to the extent possible, they changed the design language and the layout of the site separately. So for example, they changed the fonts, they changed the way that pictures were treated, they changed the title, but they kept the physical location of the buttons, the physical location of the sections, exactly the way they were, at least for a good chunk of the testing. The problem is that when you start changing both of these things at once, it's so easy to overestimate user skill. And you are going to see a good chunk of your users spend more time on the site and get lost and have difficulty navigating. And that changing the design language and the physical layout of the site, which is most confusing for users as separate, and keeping those as separate questions, is a best practice that mitigates some of that risk. Does that answer your question, Anna?
Yeah, that helps. Thanks.
Yeah.
I think I'm in Stack right now. So I just wanted to ask about what could you talk? So my question is for you is that my first question is for you, Matt, and the second question would be, I guess, for the community here at the moment. So my first question is, could you talk more about what you said before about the target audience should be thinking about is a 60-year-old woman, and why is that? And then the second question, I guess I'm opening up to everyone, so you could stack if you want. How do you, and also for you, Matt, how do you see this in the way that we're formatting it in the context of Prog Code? Like, we're very much grassroots. We don't have the capacity that these big organizations have, but in a sense, like, how can we best apply this in this kind of infrastructure that we have?
So let me take the last question first. So I think that there are, let me take a step back first of all and say that this is a hard question. And I'm much more confident that I have the right questions than that I have the right answers. And that part of why this conversation is important is I think that many of you have design insights, particularly mobile insights, that aren't public yet or that have been slow to trickle out of industry. Typically, at least with web, you would start to see big firms make a major innovation and discover something big. And the timeline for that making it into sort of the broader community and just being sort of in the air was about 4 or 5 years. mobile development has exploded so quickly that a lot of those same practices, well, some of them, certainly there are best practices, but there's a lot that still has yet to come out to sort of be written about publicly. So I think that as a community, I think there are a certain set of problems that are hard to overcome. Many of us are familiar with the lean startup approach, at least in general terms. But one of the most important things about the minimum viable product is precisely because testing is so important. That you can actually get a user base to test with, and you can find things that you simply impossible to get a priori. But the challenge with small communities is that you often don't even have the statistical power to do the amount of testing that you would like. So if Google has something on the order of 10,000 times as many users as a lot of the sites that 10,000 times as many user sessions or user hours, that's a lot. That means that it can see effects that are 1% the size of the effects that a lot of the organizations that I talk to. And for really small organizations, on the order of thousands of members, or I should say thousands of users, you can only see really, really big effects and really, really consistent effects from testing. And that means that you have to be, that there's a bigger role for hunch and gut instinct and design principles and taking lessons from larger people who can test this better to the extent that we can. Part of my goal of being in the community here is to get some. This is part of what I'm passionate about, and frankly, I have a lot of students. I have a lot of friends. I've been involved in Democratic Party quantitative and progressive quantitative data politics for a decade now. Hard to believe, actually, but it has been a decade. And so part of what I want to do is provide more opportunities for that kind of expertise and liaisons, because there's lots of people in the academy or sort of people who come through programs like the one where I teach who really want to be doing something. The other part of it is that we need ways of leveraging lessons that are learned in one project, or one successful project, and passing them off to other projects. And sometimes those lessons will apply perfectly, and sometimes they won't. But trying to get cumulative so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, I think is very important. And the first part of your question, Roppy, has to do with the median user. Yeah, I mean, if you look at who's taking action right now, and I'm in contact with a lot of these daily action lists, it turns out that the median user is a woman in her 70s who is at least partially retired. And that's consistent with what we see in traffic on social networks. Everybody thinks that social networks, Facebook is about young people. And so designing for social networks, they make, it's almost like they feel like they need to design their product like a Mountain Dew ad. In fact, that's not exactly right demographically. Digital politics is not primarily the province of the young. It's a province of those who are interested in politics, which still skew disproportionately older. I think that that's something that we find over and over again when we look at the actual user data. And we need to make sure not to let people who demographically don't look like the people we might expect. We need to make sure we're designing our projects and our products for them. Other questions?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And specifically with the lessons learned and the insights that you have already taken. Like my company right now works on like insights from different companies that has paid so much money in doing that research, and they're just not trying to reinvent the wheel. But I think this is a really good point in terms of building up programs for app creators roundtable, where it could be a sharing of insights and experiences as well, to alleviate that.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that if you have a project or interesting question that you want to test, let me know. Hit me up in Slack. I have lots of social scientists that want to be doing something useful, I'm, if
I think
there's a good chance that we can connect you with somebody who would be interested in your problem.
I think Joseph has a question.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I'm
okay. Sorry, I'm stuck in the hang of when the mic's muted and when it's not. Yeah, you're talking about blending your metrics. Do you have more to say on like how you build those models, how you want to weigh them against one another?
Yeah, I think that the main thing that we're trying to avoid with is over-reliance on a single metric. So let me give you an example of how reliance on a single metric can be a problem, right? So I think this is public now, so I think I can share it. So the Washington Post, years ago when they first started doing headline testing, they started writing 2, 3, 4 headlines for every story, doing a multi-arm bandit approach, and very quickly they would find that one headline got more clicks, and that would be the main headline. They'd switch so that everybody saw that headline. So what they realized pretty quickly after starting this program is that traffic had gone down. Anyone want to guess exactly what had happened?
Misconfusion.
Yeah.
Anyone can hear me? Yeah? Confusion.
Yeah. So it actually wasn't confusion. What had actually happened was that they were getting a different set of users. So that there's the group of people who are hardcore Washington Post users. They come directly to the site. They have subscriptions. They're the people who are going to read 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 articles in a row. They're the ones who are going to come back multiple times a day. What they'd done by focusing on click-through was essentially bring in droves of people from Facebook who would have been passing them by, and they were turning off their core supporters. So that's an example of how focus on a single metric can be problematic. So the way you get around that is by focusing not just on one metric, but on multiple metrics. Focusing on, well, in the case of news site, focusing on scroll depth, focusing on time on site, focusing on return visits, and having some metric or looking at them together or finding some metric that does a decent job of capturing all of those is going to be less likely to lead you astray.
Do you have? Well, I was more asking about like the way that you kind of build your models. Like how do you weigh those things? Because when you're going to put all these metrics into into a matrix, and like how do you adjust your weight? And again, with the Washington Post example, those metrics can change rapidly depending on your on business logic.
Yes, and well, I mean, basically Facebook can change the algorithm on you, and that can change things overnight. So one of the things that I often do is I think about what's the outcome that you care most about. So in dealing with organizations that care about subscriptions, you can have some kind of a lifetime value calculation. Some of you are familiar with that. But for example, recently I put together a model that was essentially built off of a regression. So essentially that it was, we ultimately want to maximize people who subscribe to websites. So what do? Well, we have a whole bunch of things that are correlated with subscribing to a website. And to the extent that they're correlated, they get that weight in the model. That's a pretty straightforward way of doing it. And there's no one hard and fast answer, but in this case, worked really well. Often though, this is as much, there is certainly some art here, not just science. And you need to sit down before you actually start building the model and think about what's most important. What are your prior expectations about what should be important and what isn't likely to be important?
I just want to add as well, and I think, Matt, this is something that I wanted to share with you in the first place.
Yeah.
Was that, no, Matt Malin, sorry. Because I just got it out of an interview. I just got out of an interview with a specific user for swimming, for example. And they were like activists on the ground here in New York. And one of the things that they saw during I was showing them swimming was like showing the number of items or the number of doors that a person has knocked or the number of calls that they have done or something like that. And what she said to me was quite revealing, because it was like, it's not something that I want to maximize. Like, you're showing something to me that is not relevant to me, but rather what is the quality of it is what matters. I think it's like how many people you've connected to, how many people you've had a really good relationship with, because it's in the end, like, it is a relationship that you're trying to measure, not the number of calls you've made. So it's something that was really like, like if we're showing a metric, it has to be something that we want to maximize and something that we are really that is really important and core of what we're working on in this in activism. So
yeah, I think that's I think that's a great example, Rafi. And in fact, I've seen research that shows that volunteer callers do way better than professional callers in a lot of circumstances. It looks like they're being inefficient. The professional callers are just whipping through the list, and it's 3-4 minutes everybody they talk to, or even less. The amateurs, they just talk, and it's 15 minutes, and they start chatting about kids and grandkids and things like that. But ultimately, when you go back and look at who turned out to vote and who didn't, the amateurs did better.
Well, I think we this phenomenon also kind of repeats itself in things such as like internet forum moderation. What happens is when somebody's getting paid, what they're going to do is they're going to always take the lowest energy approach to meet their like goal metrics. Whereas volunteers actually kind of have a more abstract, flexible view of exactly what it is that they, want out of their community. And
yep. Right. Thank you so much. I guess we're about to lose time. And does anyone have like last questions for Hindman? for Matt. No? Okay, thank you so much, Matt, for this amazing talk.
All right, well, thank you so much. A pleasure to be here, and I look forward to chatting with many of you in Slack, and look me up when you come through DC. And if you have research projects or things like that, things that might benefit from a social scientist, let me know. And if I can't do it, I'm sure I could connect you with somebody who'd be interested.
Thank you so much. Just to give you everyone next week, we will be having Rich Bartlett, who's like an expert on non-hierarchical organization. So that's the new content. So keep on checking out. But thank you so much, Matt, again, and have a great night, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a great night.
Thank you.